Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Danny and Troy Show. We have been away for a little while, but yes, we are back, and again, just taking some free discussion between Danny and I about whatever comes to our minds, and yeah, taking this opportunity really as a grounds for exactly that, being free and expressing yourselves. And as we have been doing that, things have been coming up in terms of creative expression and particularly autofiction as a style of writing and creative expression. And Danny has been a perfect, I believe, example of that. And I think, yeah, the content that's coming out around Drukpa in the adventures and challenges that are just free flowing from Danny's creative, expressive mode.
Creative
So,
faucet, right?
exactly. And again, so today we're doing more. I believe Danny's got another piece ready for us to, yeah, absorb. And over to you, Danny.
It's actually, whoever might be listening are our guinea pigs, right? So they're
Sure.
actually working, right? They're thinking, is this making any sense, or where's he going with this? Well, I just came back from 2 weeks on a turkey farm. You might notice a little resemblance, right? Um, Getting ready for the Thanksgiving season, but they're pushing Halloween already here in the U.S. It's incredible. Anyway, that's comment. Let me explain something to you about this process that we're going through here. Sticking to the very difficult adage that we don't write and edit at the same time, meaning that I can become tired of myself in doing whatever it is, letting the fire burn itself out, and then finding another place to get started. It doesn't really matter because we have not entered the editing phase yet. But that's a white lie because every time I read it and go back through, I see a typo. Okay, I correct it. Technically, that's editing, right?
Okay.
But
Right.
that phase of editing is what I would call flow, right? That when I'm expressing an idea, it has to be expressed adequately, and it has to create the impression that it's actually taking us somewhere rather than like a doodlebug, going round and round in circles.
Right.
And I believe that whatever it is that does happen has a purpose. And I have to control that to a large extent because if I get confused, it has an effect on me, the writer. And then I have to deal with it. And there are lots of these little issues that come up all the time. But we're trying to keep flowing. And then, like I learned in LA, we can go back and piece it together. It's like a song. Don't believe for a second that they start off, unless it's live. And then that's, edited a bit as well. You've got your sound engineer who's trying to make everything look good. You may remember people who are lip syncing, right, while they're playing the recording. I mean, did that when I first went to Russia, they were doing that all the time. It was like, here's this great star, and she's not, something technical glitch happens, and she's not speaking, she's not singing. So they get the track back on, and then she knows where she is, and they continue, and everybody acts like it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, so okay, lots of little funny things going on everywhere. So
Yeah.
anyway, where I'm driving with this one is I've milked the cow out on the Drukpa episode and where it was going because I'm following him to hell and back, principally because he's searching for something, but it's not clear what he's searching for, not even to him, which I'm reweaving into other episodes or other segments that I'm creating. So if I come to a dead end, then I start a fresh page, right? I'm using this thing on Apple, where I do my notations and I do my writing there. And So now what I've done for my own benefit, instead of just trying to read the words, I've taken a picture and placed it as the first character so that I know by picture, by image, which chapter it is. Like this one, for instance, I don't know whether you can see it or not, but it's a book that's highlighted, and it's basically called the Book of Life. So that's for a couple of different reasons. Maybe I'm stealing it from somewhere or borrowing it from somewhere on the internet, but we're not in publication yet. So for me, it's a cue. Okay, here's where we are on this one. I have Popeye for, the Kraken. I've got several photographs I use to take me there, which is very helpful. And at this point in time, Drukpa is going to have to have a Deus Ex Machina. The gods are going to have to drop from the sky, as in Greek drama, and principally say, okay, we realize you're having some trouble, so we're going to throw in a mechanism which is going to put you back on track. And in this point in time, what I'm about to read you is Drukpa's, he's in a state of desperation. He doesn't know which way to go. He's gone through all of these battles and wars to get him where he is, but he doesn't feel like he's satisfied with it. So what we're going to do is we're going to drop in the unexpected of him finding his father's book. Okay. Right? And his father, which is, the same character, I'm split personality. So to help save the day, for him at least, until we get back on track, we need to have somewhere we're going. And at this point in time, I see it two ways. Number one, the journey of the individual. Then he's rescued by the Book of Life he discovers, which is what his father wrote. And that takes him, which I'm exploring now, into the third segment, which will be the final segment, I hope, on the Hermetica. And the Hermetica by Hermes, or Trismegistus, from Egyptian, or Thoth. I hope I'm not pronouncing that. I'm not pronouncing it correctly, but it's the ibis bird with the beak. And he starts giving lessons which hopefully take all of and this is the purpose of that in ancient Egypt, is to take all of this confusion that a person is having, an Egyptian or whatever, and try to save them and the society they are living in by imposing certain rules of conduct. And one of them would be, let's not mix religion and philosophy. Then you'll just kill them both, right? Then you'll have, a Deus Ex Machina coming in with a tablet with 10 commandments on it. And it's like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. Now I've got to deal with mysticism and all that sort of stuff. So without further ado, I want you to listen for a while. I haven't decided where to stop. This is for me as well, because, for me to know whether or not it holds water, it has to read well. And in this ancient Egyptian philosophy, they deal with the sound of words. So for me, it's very important to read the words. And Troy, you've experienced this before when we're doing a presentation. It has to read well. You're writing a symphony. When do the horns come in? When do the strings come in? What notes are they playing? Who's on first violin, et cetera, et cetera. Then your conductor, or the writer would be the conductor, in creating the music of sound. So that's another reason why I'm reading it. So
right.
Without further ado, here we go. It's called The Book of Life. Subtitle: A careful dissemination of the truth for neophytes, initiates, apprentices, journeymen, hierophants, adepts, masters, and mystics on how to live forever and know you will without the notion of heaven or hell, or operational intelligence for living. First quote: there is no beginning or end. Text: ever since I was a child, I had thought there should have been a book that was there waiting for me, that had existed year on year for generations, on how to live my life, what to expect, lessons from the ones who came before me on what to know, what to do, what to look for, what not to do, and some notion of what was facing me as I grew up and went into life. But there wasn't. Nothing. Not a damn thing. How could that be? I asked myself. Was it possible that I was the only one ever born that had such an expectation? I doubted it. Then why? Multiple times I had thought of starting to write it myself, but was dissuaded by the notion that I didn't know enough to rightfully do so. What did I know? Wouldn't I know more the older I got and would just have to go back and do some heavy editing? I decided to wait. Surely life would be my editor, so I stalled. Not only did I stall, I wasn't aware that not acting immediately would extend or even cancel the effort altogether. I also thought that previous to the digitalization of everything from dirt to raindrops, such a compilation was difficult to store, retrieve, and edit. I was on the run from place to place. I have nowhere to put it. Pre-cloud, pre-digital warehousing, pre. Other factors that stalled the start and continuation included lack of encouragement. And someone egged me on, perhaps as an indicator of others who shared my desires and needs for some bookmarkers of what no one else talked about but me. Even my level of knowledge was forever displacing prior knowledge that made it inappropriate to tabulate accurately. Part of the society of which I was a part was programming to discourage as a forerunner of weeding out the competition while still young, dumb, and full of cum, as the saying goes. The military serves that function as well to encourage service, obedience, loyalty, semper fidelis or semper fi, and like for people whose strategies included scorched earth of the very people of which they were a part. With that kind of King Herod approach to the underlings, going from door to door and killing every male youth under a certain age, would oblige the spared ones, the inept survivors, with an opportunity they could never respond to appropriately enough to produce any substantial upset to the established ruling class. Cloaking such activities in a framework that was promoted as normal and to be expected would produce the illusion of that is what to expect in life, built upon the rewards in an afterlife that would, through a model of obedience, keep everyone in line. Parents would pass down, not up, what they knew as proof of planned obsolescence and futility by exemplifying their lives as what would become of everyone that came before them amid the floating silver-lined cloud of, "See there, I told you so." Suddenly the answer as to why there was no book of life outside of the Bible, that abstract story told piece by piece in a meaningless account of fictional history, indecipherable to all except God's given few, to substantiate the model within which police, bosses, parents, teachers, military, educators, and other betrayers operated, allowing themselves the crumbs under the table that served their betters, the ones out of touch, as an added measure of don't even try, because we've already told you in an ingrained fashion what you will experience, so save your energy and worship like a fucking slave the structure of the universe according to what we want you to know to better serve. It was put in my head and I smoked it. It was put in my pipe and I smoked it. It turned out to be rabbit tobacco, which made me sicker than hell. Received the belt from my father, a wrathful smoker, with the instruction that if I ever disobeyed the example he set and adjudicated, I would suffer the whip he loved so dearly as a lesson of disobedience that was never made clear until I did something he didn't like. Therein the death from above aspect of heavenly wrath would claim its right to right all wrongs and reestablish the natural order of things in the way we had experienced, in the way he had experienced his life, one to pass along as a show of love. Beating a child to loosen their skin so the child could grow, or sparing the rod to spoil the child, was disobedience hidden in the frustration he felt in performing tradition as a way of doing God's work, was totally fucked up, not down. He was to learn fuck out later in Latvia when he would be advised by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that was a kind of seizing an opportunity from a foreigner who was obliged to follow the rules of visitation drummed into the populace bent on protectionism of a sedated peoples who realized the days of their well-earned rest had arrived, only to be replaced by others who sought to advantage themselves over the lazy lot and satisfy their urges to triumph with their own beliefs, with the help of the local governments and police forces that had driven the uninspired childless procreators to reducing the workforce to the disabling effects of retirement or localization. It became clearer. One book would serve the purpose easily enough as supporting the authority of God, your superior in everything, everywhere, and anyhow. Any attempts to bring that down seated you in hell, a lake of fire, as cold as hell, away from God, the contradictory, suicidal Judas the betrayer capitalist pig with 30 pieces of silver at his dead feet, mystified son of a bitch that had no mother to instruct him of his misadventures. Poor parents born to fail, cannon fodder. This is what became of the downtrodden. This was his fate, except for a glitch in his genetics from a post-war bride from Germany, dropped like an unexploded bomb whose spirit was indomitable. No amount of beatings, no tears from a father for his guilt in beating the innocent into line. No tear-dropping old man admitted vocally that he was his favorite over the other two. No admission of his failure as a father that resulted from his love of sex and obstruction of that by the presence of children would break him any more than did the firebombing of Dresden or Tokyo would the sponges of fate at ground zero. And there I stop with a quick self-analysis.
Yeah.
Of briefly before I ask your response.
Okay.
Reaction is that you mentioned this new aspect that I discovered in August. It's now September. In Seattle at my nephew's wedding, right? My niece principally brought up a topic of autofiction. And I said, what the hell is that? And she said, well, that's what I'm trying to deal with now. It's very popular. If I could get into that market, it's like people thinking that there's a job out there waiting for them in the air. But there's no instruction manual on how to find it in the air. So they glorify themselves and their activities and how they feel about being discriminated against and, all the hard things that children today have to face in their own head. This, pseudo psychiatric warfare that's going on now within the individual and resulting from, for instance, Mr. Joe saying that all of the MAGA people in the United States are terrorists. We need to get rid of them. And with Trump's response as like, this guy's insane. Like, yeah, we know that. So that's when she brought up the subject of people who were supposedly writing their memoirs, only to discover that when their editor or their agent got it, they were put down because they would say, this is not a memoir. This is not fiction. It's somewhere in between, and we don't have any use for it. So one guy or one gal made it through the gate and became, of course, you know, the glorified future of literary endeavors. And they called it like autobiography, which every piece of writing is because it comes from one person, if we're lucky, or their impressions, a string or a stream, and fiction. So it became autofiction. Auto in the sense, and I'm sure they talked about this too, where it comes automatically, stream of consciousness kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But still you have in mind the idea you want to tell a story, and so you jump here, jump there, like what I'm writing now. And I was doing it because that's how I write, how I've always written. Time comes, you know, for a comment. Okay, why not? Write it down, because as I said, we just, you know, we're doing it. We're not editing, we're writing. And with the idea in mind that it's an autofiction and you can do that now legitimately. Thank you, you know, Hollywood and Prentice Hall and all these other people that now I've been legitimized.
Right.
From having been demonized. It's a terrible transition to make. So that's when I passed my notepad over to her and I said, would you look at this? Because she's a writer, likes to think she's a writer herself. And I was afraid that, you know, she would say, what is this? You know, you want some real writing, read my stuff. But almost perfect interpretation of her. She's, but anyway, she got into it right away. And I thought, what kind of writing is this? You just heard it. It's all over the place. But there's something about a kind of an inoculation aspect that once the needle in, you know, and you're pushing the plunger in, you know, and it starts heating up in your veins, you're not going to ask anybody to pull the needle out. Not at that point in time, right? Because then you're into what's the effect going to be? Where am I going to feel it? Is it really hot? Am I doing okay? And you go into this sort of, you know, monologue to yourself, except you don't write it down. So in this whole process, coming from a theatrical background, of which I love and which is in my veins, only the opportunities are missing, or me getting off my fat ass and going out there and finding something without, you know, considering the price of gas, and I'm supposed to be doing this, and I'm a family man, and what, you know, blah, 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 forever. So with the way I speak, and it's easier, I think, by the way, when I'm speaking it, and whether I'm reading it or I'm not reading it now, it's just coming out of me, that there has to be some kind of allure in it to keep people listening. Or otherwise, you know, they'll pull a Mr. Mushroom and look away, you know, and then you know, of course, that you lost them. And it's probably not worth it to get them back because they're not on the same boat you're on. And with that, we'll pass the microphone, which is right there in front of your face, over to you, Troy, for your comments.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm relating actually to data science. You know, people that know
you would.
me,
everything's about data science to you.
know my story about how I was just doing some stuff. Actually, it involved, you know, R&D. It involved data management. It involved software development. It involved all these things, and I was sitting next to researchers. And then one day, someone came up to me and said, "You know what you're doing? You're doing data science, and you're a data scientist." And then, because you were doing autofiction, you were doing autofiction before you even knew that was a thing, or that was a term. And then when that came, it was like, oh yeah, now actually it made it a deeper connection with other people, with your niece, first of all, and then also with me. I mean, when I Googled what's autofiction, and I go, yeah, that's exactly what Danny's been doing. To kind of rephrase from memory what it is, it's about a mixture of real events with fictional events that are related to a person. It doesn't leave people kind of understanding or remembering what they said, but it leaves people with a feeling. And that is like, now that it has that autofiction just as a name, and people can go Google it and go, oh yeah, that seems interesting. I think it brings its engagement. It's not just, oh, I've never heard this before and I don't know what it is, so it just, they go somewhere else. But coming into it with a lens and saying, I'm going to look at some autofiction now. Okay, yeah. They might say, oh, what's autofiction? Oh, okay, now I'm going to look at it. And then they can really, yeah, like I think what you're saying, bring in that aspect of attention grabbing or engagement or connection and not losing them. But of course, some people still will. But it brings that back to data science. That's what I felt is like, now I know how to explain what I'm doing. And if you want to know, what it is, and then kind of what evolved actually was data science kind of moved into different spaces and different meanings and different, but I still have my own interpretation and understanding, and I do what I do, and I'll stick with what I love doing, whether it's called data science or not, but I love doing what I do. And yeah, in addition to that, I want to add, like, we keep talking about not editing, and you mentioned also the symphony aspect, and I get connections with music. And I mean, I haven't played music for a very long time, but maybe 10 years ago was the last session. My brother plays drums, my other brother plays bass, and my other brother, we've got three brothers, is all pretty good on rhythm guitar. And then the only instrument I actually learned was the piano accordion, but it didn't kind of fit. So I was on the mic and we were jamming, and we didn't have any music to go with. It was just the jamming along and seeing what comes out and in that flow. So I see a connection also with what you're doing with autofiction and jamming and music and being in that flow. And you don't need a band. Actually, what was really sweet about it was, I guess, in some ways, because we were brothers, we had, I believe, a connection. And we kind of could feel and jump off what everybody was feeling. But you can do it individually. Just, if you are into music, or just pick up an instrument and jam away. And listen to see what's coming. And, that's what I think, going back to the bigger picture of creative expression, is really, I guess, beneficial. It brings this enjoyment of being free and being open and letting things flow. And unfortunately, our lives, there's very little time that people spend to just dedicate to creative expression, because they've got all these bills and duties and places to be, because of the way society has kind of instilled or brought about what is required. And it's kind of, squishing out this space. So I want, and that's what I believe is the goal, is to really to bring people to be aware that creative expression is important. Here are some techniques, here are some ways to do it. Let's not forget about being creative, because also, particularly in my role as a data scientist, this is where the real innovations happen. And I believe, there's a big difference between doing R&D and innovation. But although very important, both as data science and data scientist role, But that's where I love to be, is at the innovation side, where we really transcend the old ways and invent new ways. Of course, yeah, making minor improvements, 1%, 2% in efficiency along the way is great too. But yeah, it's the world, I think, needs more innovation, more real huge changes in the systems and products we use.
I
I'm
think
getting all that from you. Yeah.
I'm following you, and a couple of my own reactions are coming from what you're expressing. I wanted to call it a kind of jazz, right?
Sure.
It's not music. Well, it is musical. There's a guy, his name is Alex, on the Duran, which I listen to. They talk about politics and all kinds of issues around the world. And I sent
Yeah.
him a note today because the way he expresses himself, he does it this way, this kind of thing. And I sent him a note and I said, listening to you without trying to listen to the content is like listening to a symphony.
Hmm.
And you're listening to it. And I did that once when I wrote a play for Alan Toussaint, mother-in-law, down in New Orleans. And the leads couldn't sing. And I told him, I said, which I wish I could have learned this lesson for myself, was like, don't try to sing. What you're doing is you're speaking a message. Like, good
Yeah.
God, Bob Dylan, right? There's a groundbreaking thing for you. I don't know whoever told him he could sing because he can't. But basically, he just goes about doing what he wants to do, and people love it. He's not country, but it's the same sort of thing with him. And all of these famous singers, for instance, right? Joe Cocker, Christ Almighty, you can't call that a singing voice, or Barbara Streisand, who almost wasn't a singer because somebody told her that her nose was too big, and that it ended up being that's the reservoir where you get this resonance, and your voice, can drill through concrete and put that to some good use, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And when I sing, I sing for myself. And then somebody's listening, like Lena or somebody, they would say, God, I love to hear you sing. And I'm saying, what? I'm not a singer. Well, I'm not a writer either. I'm not an actor either. I don't know. I'm a guy sitting on his ass for too long lately, doing this while I'm building wings on my barn, or, trying to renovate my cars and my kitchen and my bathroom all at the same time. I think it's a normal life. And if people aren't living that kind of life, I think they surely must be frustrated to some degree of inviting themselves to be themselves, right? And that's a tough nut to crack. And, I feel like I got that message. I don't think anybody gave it to me. It just sort of came to me, that Hermes is this ibis-headed guy. They're thought of as scribes. That doesn't mean that you have to put yourself through the added displeasure of telling people you're not a writer. That's not what this is all about. If you have something you want to say and you want to write it down, then, sorry, I don't want to shock anybody, then you're a writer. You can be, an accomplished writer. You can be a fictional writer. You can, maybe you're not a published author, right? There are so many little things that are disclosed, I think, like you were saying, in this monologue that Drukpa is having with himself. Now he's discovered the book of life. In the whole first session, which is quite lengthy, he's deriding the fact that there is no book of life, only to discover that his father had written one, right?
Yeah.
And then he's sort of matching up mentally, like what the reader would do, I would expect, to take the life of the person who he spent some time describing to other people, and then he finds his father's book of life, what he had hoped for, and his father had hoped for it too. So it's like, well, there it is. It's the book of life without trying.
Yeah.
And then you match his life with what his father did, which is what we do, not necessarily because every father writes a book, but you hear about your father's life while you're living, and to a lot of people, their fathers are their heroes. and they're, looking at my uncle, or I mean, how many uncles did I have? Four, I think it was, on my father's side. And it was like they were examples. But today, who do I hold as an example? What I know that what I'm supposed to do, I'm supposed to see politicians as the example, or successful businessmen. You know what? There's something to life outside of politics and business. There's the relationship I don't have with any of my neighbors. And we could go on forever. The best thing I can do to make contact with people around here in the country is to go to the post office or shop at Walmart, where the same girl is in the self-checkout area and she looks as sour and angry as she always has. And I'm thinking, why are you here? Well, then comes the explanation of her father and glaga, 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 whatever. And it's like, that's no more interesting listening to it, but I do from time to time. But I interrupt her and I said, you still sound miserable. Maybe she doesn't know that. Maybe she's just thinking I'm just telling people about my life in a way in which they run from me. I mean, I think a lot of this stuff comes out, and it comes out, I guess, on a very, I'm not Homer, or somebody who would write these fantastic works, but I don't know whether or not they started out thinking this is going to be a book that's going to last thousands of years. Yeah, well, maybe if it has, some information in it that people want to keep, or maybe we'll just write it on a scroll and stick it in a cave somewhere in the Red Sea area or Dead Sea area and see what happens to it, because I won't know. Right. And I think that this is the level, because we've talked about folk stories and legends and, this kind of stuff, the Aesop's fables kind of stuff that works everyday life. And now in this country, in the US, they're taking all that away from everybody, because not everybody can relate to Paul Bunyan and the Blue Ox, Babe the Blue Ox. So we'll just cut that from American culture without realizing there's nothing else in the bag. What are you going to do? You're going to come up from El Salvador and you're going to bring stories about South America that don't work for historical and cultural reasons and interpretive reasons in the USA. But then we got people in DC or wherever that are saying, well, this whole equality thing is really important. And it's like, would you please shut up? Stop telling me how I should be living my life. And I think that's one way of priming a conversation with people. Because as you said, and of course, if we were together, I might read one sentence and I wouldn't be offended. And you would say, can you stop there? Would you read that again? What the hell? And you spend the whole night talking about that one utterance. That is how a reaction is to how I responded to living. And being so disappointed that all these people who came before me and they never left anything for the next generation, that's like a crime against humanity, the real one. While they're holding a carrot over here, swinging it in front of you and picking your pocket at the same time, that's their story, and that's what we want to promote for the future. And as you can see, we're like rabbits, man. We just hop all over the place because we need, maybe this work will somehow encourage people to just get it out.
Right.
If you're not Mark Twain, don't let it bother you.
Sure.
You've got something to say, so say it.
Yeah. Well, I think going back to creative expression, I think we all have this need to express ourselves creatively, and whatever that way that comes, or whatever that way works, whether it's painting, music, writing, don't forget about it and give yourself that opportunity too, because I think, it's going to be something that sparks new innovation, new transcended ways of living and fixing broken systems. but first of all, just is enjoyable as an individual, no matter how crazy the world is and what's happening and what's going up and down or wrong or right. But
Right.
you can have that space, and yeah, that's important. One thing that you touched on, I believe, that I find really fascinating is this boundary. It's almost an unwritten boundary where the character of a story interacts with the writer. So where you mentioned like the father and there's a book, it's like the character in the story realizes, hey, there's someone writing this story. I'm living and I'm gonna there that boundary can be broken. And I mean, yeah. Well, I don't know if it can be, but you can write a story where the character interacts with the writer. But it's not. It's just a story.
Yeah, it's maybe sometime in the future I'll say, oh yeah, I thought all that out ahead of time. It's like, no, you didn't. You were in such dire straits. You were about to slit your own wrists with you could figure out a way to which way the story is going to go, and then suddenly you realize, here's the son discovering a book by his father that he had wished he had written but didn't know that he did, and he's talking about the same thing that the central character, Drukpa in this case, had done the same thing that his father had done without knowing it. And so then he finds that he has similarities in his creative pursuits or in his creative expression in trying to find a way when his father was trying to find a way. And wouldn't it be nice if in the third part, he gets to say, well, Dad, here's what I came up with. Right. What's my conclusion? Because, somebody else is going to read it and they're going to be looking for something in it to help themselves. And it would be kind of nice if there was a string, these things are related. Yeah. And it's kind of nice too that it came as a surprise, because whether it was written that way into the story, I can say it wasn't written that way into the story purposefully. That it was, the accident of trying to work things out and then, beating myself up about it and then waking up in the morning with an answer. And it's like, where did that come from? Like, don't ask, right?
Well,
I live in a haunted house anyway.
I think, just being in touch or being in the flow, it allows these sorts of things to just, come. And as you said, like be inscribed to a bigger message. But it's just fascinating. I see it's just one of those infinite streams. Like you're writing a story, essentially a book, that in that book, someone finds a book, and in that book, they're writing about the book. And then it just keeps, and that book, it just never ends. There's a book, and I'm going, okay, but that brings me to a space where I go, well, isn't, the world amazing?
So we have the son looking for a way, finding his father who's looking for a way.
Sure.
And then his duty, of course, we go to like principal character, first character, second character, and then the first character comes in again to offer a conclusion as a separate person, right? Where he has had his own experience, he reads about his father's experience, and then it's like, well, have I gained anything from it that is a keeper that can be helpful to, myself first? And I'd like to think, well, I'm doing myself some good by going through this inquiry, which is not easy because it's like being tortured, right? It's kind of like that, final exam they would give. I never gave exams, but short ones. But it's like the pressure you feel, right, to get it right, and the clock is ticking, and you've got 5 minutes left, and you're still on question number 12, and you've got 20 questions. What am I going to do? You start panicking, And that's sort of like this math or what they used to call it when you had to answer a question not by choosing, not multiple choice, not true false. What was it called when you had to write something by composition, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And you get under that kind of pressure, and that's the same thing. We're taking a math test in this autofiction novel, right? Except it's not lasting for 50 minutes. It's lasting for 50 years.
Sure.
Anyway, so can we say
Okay.
we've taken this horse ridden this horse where the horse wanted to go?
Yep.
And I understand that you have Father's Day tomorrow in Australia.
Yep.
So we'll see you in 48 hours. And thank you
Right.
for anyone who's listening. And, you know, if you can send us a note, let us know where it's going. You guys are nuts or something like that. Everything is acceptable.
Exactly.
Okay, Troy?
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you very much, man. Thanks for listening. You were listening, weren't you?
It was.
See ya. Bye now.